Would that be correct? Does everybody agree? Yes. Okay. Well, Dan, you're the only Senate candidate here, so I think the floor is yours.
Thank you.
This is Dan Botz.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, very good to be here tonight. I have been here, I think, a couple times before. The one that sticks in my mind was with a big march, really in defense of this mosque several years ago, when we had a big community march with people from many different community and religious organizations who came here. So I'm glad to be back here again under circumstances that are different and better. I'm a school teacher. I teach Spanish to little children between 1st and 8th grade. And before this, I was for about 10 years a professor of Latin American Studies and U.S. history, but mainly Latin American Studies in this area, mostly teaching at Miami University. And so then I've changed occupations, and now I'm dealing with little children. But I enjoy my work a lot. I live here in Clifton. We walked over here tonight to the mosque. I wanted to say that I usually come in, and mostly what I talk about, though I always talk about all of these issues, is I usually come in and talk first about the economic crisis, because that's, to me, the thing that is uppermost in my mind as I look around the state. We have 10% unemployment, more or less, around the country, including in Ohio. 20% or 17%, they say, if you talk about discouraged workers. In African American and Latino communities, it's about 40%, and or 50% when you talk about youth. The young people can't get a first job today. The Republicans and the Democrats have both failed to deal with this economic crisis, and that's why there has to be some alternative. When the private sector fails, when what's called free enterprise fails, the state has to move in a big way. It hasn't moved in a big enough way. We have many, many people without jobs. The government should move in and set idle plants to work, put people to work who knew how to make those plants hum, and put them to work building for the green economy. I usually talk about the environment, and I want to mention that too, because I'm very concerned about our environmental crisis, global warming. It's based on the fact that we're using too much coal, and we're using other carbon fuels, and we have to stop it. And you can't get people in the Republican and Democratic parties to talk about any use of coal. There's no clean coal. We don't want to be doing that. We want to get out of that business. And but you can't get people to talk about it. We ought to provide a transition for all those coal miners and people who work in coal power plants. But we ought to end the use of coal, and we ought to reduce the use of petroleum. But the other thing I always talk about is U.S. foreign policy and the wars abroad. And I have a very simple and clear position on this. Get U.S. troops out of Iraq, Afghanistan, and Pakistan right now. Bring them all home. They should not be in those countries. The United States does not belong there. And it is a policy which creates anti-Americanism, and it creates enemies for the United States. And it is foolhardy. From the point of view of the U.S. national security, it's foolhardy to be there. But more important than that is an enormous waste. It's an enormous waste of human lives. People who are epidemiologists estimate that maybe 1 million people have been killed in Iraq. Imagine that. 1 million people, certainly between 100,000 and 1 million people killed in Iraq. That is a crime, it is a sin, it is a shame, and the United States should apologize to the world for that, and it should try the war criminals, Mr. Bush and the others who are responsible for that. This is a terrible, terrible policy. Likewise, we're pursuing this policy now in Afghanistan. It's a loser. The people of Afghanistan are not going to permit this to continue, and we should be out of Afghanistan and be out now. And we should stop this shameful bombing of Pakistan, sending drone missiles in there that are killing men and women and children almost on a daily basis now. And you should all know that President Obama has not reduced this. He has increased the drone missile attacks. President Obama has increased and is doing this, and it's a terrible thing. It shouldn't happen. We should bring that money home to create jobs here. We should take care of the issues of health, education, and public welfare here in the United States, and not be spending that money on war abroad, as I said earlier. How do we pay for the kinds of things I think we should have, such as free education here, such as free health care for all, single-payer health care leading to public medicine for everyone? How do we pay for that? You could start by going back and taxing the rich at 80%, as we did in this country between 1945 and 65. Between 1945 and 65, we taxed the top tax bracket at 80%. We now tax it at 36%. 36%. The rich have had a 50% tax cut. We should stop that. We should tax them at 80%. When I went to school in California, I went from K to PhD. You go free in California when I went to school. You could go free to college in New York. I tell this to students today, they go, "You're kidding." No, it's true. How come? They tax the rich to pay for education. That's what we should do now. We have to change the policies in this country. The real alternative is to end a society where the corporations dominate our world. I often say, think about a working woman with a couple of kids. Instead of putting the CEO first, the CEO first, as we always do, and put his profits first and his corporation first, let's think about a working woman with a couple of kids. We put her first. We say, what does she need? How do we take care of her education, her health, her transportation, her housing for those kids? So that's, I have to say, that was my mother raising those 2 kids. So it's very personal. That's the way the society ought to run. And that's why I'm running for the U.S. Senate. I hope I'll get your vote. And it's great to be here again under better circumstances. And I'd be delighted to stick around and talk with any of you who'd like to.